That sounds kind of fun. And a few days later, they sent me a job offer.
Okay, so
And
they convinced you that this is going to be fun, and
yeah,
you were
We're rambling a lot.
No, but it's also it's hard, right? Because it's so new, but we're currently so mentally involved with it. It's always hard to
stick to
fill other people in, because we talk about this a lot, right?
Right.
Hey guys, welcome to the 7th episode of the Mayank Show. And in this episode, we're gonna talk to Kai and Malin, who are basically a tech couple with an entrepreneurial mindset. And why I say that? See, basically Kai and Malin are basically based in Vancouver, Canada right now, and what they do is they do freelancing, plus they do have a software product made by themselves, which they are experimenting as their entrepreneurial journey. And the product is all about tracking your time. If you are at a contract work, if you are a freelancer, then you have to give your billing to your client of your timings, how many hours do you work. So that software solves that problem. You need to check that out. The name is Orbit. And in this episode, we're going to talk to Kai and Malin about the same, that how can you make your own software product and you can place it in the market, and you can do all the marketing thing right, and all these struggles behind going along with a tech startup that they're thinking about, and managing things like freelancing along with what all they do in their life. So guys, this episode is going to be a lot more insightful about all the tech people out there in the industry, because this will give you a great insight about how things work and how people are making it work in the real world. So without any further ado, let's roll the intro.
Welcome to the Mayank Show, guys. Kai and Malin, welcome to the Mayank Show.
Thank you. Thanks.
So, guys, I don't think my viewers know about you guys, but I have given you a short intro. So they must be having some idea about you guys. So can you please also give your short intro if you feel like?
Yeah, sure. I think it's probably best if you start out, Kai, because our journey sort of is combined. So what if?
I mean, are we talking about an entire history here, or I mean, as far as short intro goes, I think you'll be all right.
Okay, yeah. So I'm Malin. I'm doing a bit of everything, but I'm a software developer. But I also am very interested in design in general and just building nice products in general. Yeah, I've been doing iOS development for a long time, since Swift came out, and focus a lot on Swift UI lately, which has been fun. I think we'll get into that a bit more as well. So I kick it over to you, Kai.
Cool. I'm Kai. Also been doing software development for a while. Started working on iOS platforms the night that Swift was announced. Before that, did backend development and various other things. And also recently, a lot of Swift UI, Vapor on the server. Anything that's field splitting edge, we decided to dive right in.
Yeah, also Swift UI on macOS, which I think is making it even more bleeding.
So are you guys more into all these iOS, macOS, watchOS, even tvOS?
We definitely want to get into tvOS. I just think tvOS is a sort of, you have a special use case. There are not that many apps that fit there. Okay. But with our app, Orbit, which is a time tracking and invoicing app, we think that we have this sort of very nice visual dashboard, and we think that could work on the Apple TV as well, actually. Especially if you work in an office. I mean, most people work from home at the moment, but many offices have TVs, and having like a dashboard where you see how much time you spend on stuff could be pretty cool. You can make it a competition.
Let's first see if Apple still updates the Apple TV, and if tvOS has a future. And if there's a new Apple TV, we will make a Orbit dashboard for tvOS. If not, then we might rather focus on other platforms.
Yeah, it's not our top priority, but yeah, it seems like a fun platform. But yeah, we started out with this app. We started out making it for macOS, and I think that was a lot because we hadn't done macOS development before, and we thought Swift UI was supposed to work everywhere. So let's put that to the test and get familiar with Mac at the same time. So that's why we started out there, and we thought if it works on Mac, that's gonna mean that like we can use SwiftUI on iPadOS and WatchOS and iOS as well.
So guys, we have been discussing like the core technical part here, but to give some more context to the audience, like they must be like maybe confused about what we are talking about right now, right? So let's just start from the very scratch. That how did you guys met, from where you guys are basically, and how did you started off with the iOS journey? Can you please give a highlight about that as well?
Mm-hmm. So I think this is, I can start where we are at. So at the moment, we're in Vancouver, Canada. Mm-hmm. Originally, I'm from Sweden. That's why you might pick up an accent. But the accent might be a bit strange because I also lived in Australia for a while. So I might have some Australianness in there as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I grew up in Sweden. Then I moved across the world, I guess, to Perth, Australia to study. I was sick of the cold weather in Sweden, so we thought we should try something different.
We lived almost at the Arctic Circle for 1 year, and then we decided, all right, let's see where we can move instead, where it's maybe not minus 30 degrees multiple days in a row.
So we went to a place where there are plus 30 or plus 40 degrees, which was a huge difference. And it was so nice. It's like people in Australia, when you live in Australia for a while, and I think that's the same wherever you live, you will notice that you will notice the seasons, and the winters will be cold in comparison to the summer. Mm-hmm. But we moved during Australian winter, and we thought it was amazing. We thought it was like summer weather. We were like outside in shorts, and it was great. But yeah, so that's where we moved to. That's partly why we moved to Australia.
So was that a conscious choice to move to Australia, and how easy was it to immigrate to Australia as a, like, Kai, you are from Germany, and Malin,
I'm from Germany. And then I moved to Sweden, and then we decided, all right, Sweden is too cold. Let's move somewhere else.
Right.
And when we were indoors during the Arctic winters in northern Sweden, we decided to just make a list. Let's put together a list of things that we are trying to get out of the move. And at the time, when we planned to move, Malin studied psychology, and I studied business. So that was before we kind of moved into kind of the tech area. I mean, we were always super passionate and interested in technology, but not as software developers at that point. So we had our checklist and made like a list of all the things we were after. We wanted an English-speaking country, wanted certain weather conditions, we wanted...
With certain weather conditions, I think we just didn't want snow for 6 months a year.
So what did you find the best about Australia?
Australia is interesting. Australia is very far away from a lot of other places. So it kind of is isolated by just geographically. Which led to certain, as far as the tech community and the community in general goes, it leads to certain special kind of situations. Like, I think the Australian tech community is very tight. Like most people know each other. Like you kind of get to know everyone in the tech community. Everyone's trying to help each other out. You know everyone by name. It's very supportive.
And it's not just in your city. It's also like of people who are across all of Australia and across the continent.
So is it like because there is a limited scope of tech, or is it something which is,
I think it's a combination, right? Because of the isolation and how far away it is from a lot of other places, a lot of conferences happen. Australia has conferences, and people go there because going to a conference in other countries, like Europe has a lot of conferences, right? North America has a lot of conferences, but it's always quite a trip. Like flying from Sydney to San Francisco is an 18-hour flight. It's Australia is just really far away from most of the rest of the kind of English-speaking tech world. Therefore, you have a lot of local communities and a lot of local meetups, and they're kind of always coming together at those events rather than, a lot of friends that we have here in Canada, they tend to go to a conference, not right now, obviously, but in the olden times, they go a lot to conferences in the Bay Area or in Denver or in other places in the US. And there's not as much kind of in Canada because the US is so much bigger of a market. But Australia, despite being a smaller market, because of the isolation, people still have a lot of conferences and meetups and those kind of things. So it's just a very kind of tight group, which is very interesting and very kind of nice. But at the same time, the flip side is it is fairly small. So if you're building something with like a world scope, it's a bit harder because you are far away. You're in a very awkward time zone. It's hard to meet people from other countries.
Right.
And there are, of course, conferences that, even though I love the Australian conferences, WWDC is not in Australia, right? So it's always going to be a bit of a hike or a bit of a trip if you want to go over to other conferences as well. So you do notice the isolations at some point.
Okay.
But what I liked was that there were many people who were very dedicated in the community who went up at 3 a.m. to watch the keynote, for example. So you see that as well. And I think you can really see the people who are into
even here in India, like it's not that comfortable or convenient for us to watch WWDC because its time is completely different for us. So even
but therefore I found that the people who are there was a bit
please
of
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that therefore I found that the people who are really into like Apple and the tech and the community, they're really dedicated, right? Because they gotta get up in the middle of the night.
Right. So how did you guys started off with the very first job? Like you went there to study as well, right? So how was the process So how was this transition from this college to this professional life for you guys?
When we moved to Australia, I think after about half a year, I started I thought maybe I should do one course in computer science just because I was always curious. And Australia has a fairly flexible education system where you have to take courses that are not part of your core curriculum. So it's kind of, you can pick whatever you want. If you want to learn some about psychology, you can take that. If you want to do some computer science, you can do that. If you want to do some chemistry, you can do that. So I thought, considering that I had to do courses outside of my main business major, I thought maybe I should try some computer science. So I took one computer science class. And that was way more fun than any other class I've taken. It was way easier. Like I was always busy with other things anyway. So it wasn't that I just studied. I also had like other jobs that I worked on and other projects I was working on. So it was a good trade-off of I seem to have a natural talent because I got incredibly good marks at that course. It was fun and it was actually way less work because it kind of came natural to me. So I kind of got the course record at a time for that course. I was like, cool, that seems way better. Let me just change my major. And Malin, as I did some of the courses, she thought, hey, that actually does seem a lot of fun. So she also did some of the homework that I had. She was like, I also want to try that.
Yeah. Like even if I wasn't even enrolled in the course.
Before deciding that, Malin, in which course were you enrolled or what were you pursuing before that?
I was doing psychology at that point. And I think I felt so similar to Kai. It's like, it just felt so much more fun. Like when just from looking at his assignments, like it just felt great to like create something and to be able to build something. And I thought you could really see like a natural progression of like learning development as well. Like you start out writing Hello World and then you start making a program and you really sort of getting somewhere. And I felt the same. I was also...
And business classes felt like work. Well, the computer science class felt like, that is a fun thing to do. So I was looking forward to those assignments and I dreaded my business assignments.
So when Kai, at that point, Kai was enrolled in that one unit or in that one class. And since I thought that since I also needed some like additional classes, I thought I should also try out computer science and try the same class. So I ended up trying that one as well. And then in the end, both of us ended up changing over and just studying computer science.
And that's actually also turning into my first job I had before was technically a computer science major. That was after I took that one course. The professor that was involved with that course, he recommended me to a local business that did software development. And he said, look, you should talk to this person. I set you up for an interview. I was like, all right, I don't know anything. I've done this one course, a little bit of C. So I went to the interview and I said, look, I know nothing. I have no idea what I'm doing. I kind of like the introduction to computer science, but I have no experience. I'm not good at anything. They're like, cool, hired. So that's how I got my first job.
Okay. And for you, Malin?
So for me, it was also while I was still studying computer science. And so I already started getting into iOS development outside of, and I felt like at that point, I felt like I was so interested in tech and so interested in programming in general. So I spent a lot of my free time outside of university also doing those things.
Oh,
so
nice.
I didn't learn any mobile development through university. I did all of that on the side. And when Swift came out, I sort of jumped on that. And then I started being a bit more active on Twitter and writing a bit about what I was doing, but not a lot. But I did write about like the new iPhone coming out, and that was the first year we had a large iPhone, I think, like the max size. So I took a picture of that phone and I wrote something pretty nerdy, and I also wore the blog during Fireball, by John Gruber. So I wore a During Fireball shirt and I just took a picture and wrote something. And then I tweeted about it, about getting the phone. And then a person at the startup in the same city that we studied came across my profile, or came across my tweet. And then he knew that the CEO at that company read the same blog. He's like, oh, I recognize that t-shirt. And then he sort of just reached out to me and was like, oh, actually, like, I think you would work really well, like fit really well into the team, and you should meet the CEO. And the CEO was, he was the CEO, but he was also programming. He was doing everything, and he was really into Apple and tech in general. So we just caught up for a coffee a couple of days after this other guy contacted me. And then, they pretty much asked like when I could get started, because they needed help on their
This
iOS
process
app.
has been like you both told me about the transition, right, from college to your first job, and this sounds like something which has been very spontaneous, and you didn't have to put more efforts in getting that first gig, right?
I know, and that's why, like, it's not a very traditional way of getting a job, right? You're not just usually.
Because I was assuming. Sorry to cut you in between. I was just assuming that maybe you guys have applied through some sources or maybe through some portals, and then you got your interview scheduled. Then you might have faced some rejections. Then you might have got your first job. But this is nice. I mean,
no, it was the easiest path possible, but also it's very unlikely, right? If someone would ask me, look, I'm looking for my first software development job, I wouldn't say, you know what, just write a tweet.
Yeah.
Sure, the CEO of a startup will find you.
So
right?
This is basically the power of a tweet, right?
Yeah.
But it's not just that. I also think this goes back to Kai's earlier point with the community being so small in Australia. I think if I would have been in a bigger city or in a country that has more developers, maybe it would not be as easy for that person to see my tweet. But he probably saw, oh, there's a local person working with iOS development, I should chat with her. So I do think, again, like the fact that they were so like tightly knitted and sort of wanted to have someone in the local community,
but also few other developers, right? There, I mean, realistically, the city we were living in, it was a fairly large. It was around 1 million people living there, but they would probably only have like 20, 30 kind of engaged iOS developers in that city, right? Like people that would go to meetups engaged. I mean, there are probably a whole bunch of people in like random banks and insurance companies that do iOS development as a job that they were kind of pushed into. But as far as like core people that are super passionate about it and that want to do iOS and they're dedicated a whole bunch of their career towards the Apple platform, there were not that many people. So it was fairly easy to get to know other people in the industry and kind of get a foothold in a job in that industry as well.
So what would be your advice to someone who is looking for his or her first job? So how can they apply for it? Because
just write tweets.
I'm just expecting this answer. But yeah, what else?
I think Meetup is like, if you go to kind of local tech meetups, I think that's a great place. I mean, you don't want to go to Meetup and be like, hey, I need a job, anyone please hire me, right? But if you genuinely care about what you're doing, you will get enjoyment out of going to meetups or going to either in person, hopefully soon again, or online. Like it will actually be a fun experience, and the chances of meeting people that do interesting things that you get along with and that you might want to work with are way higher. And it's such a great kind of way in, because if you already talk to someone at a meetup, you know you might be getting along with them. And it's way nicer to know that you're joining a company or a team where you get along with someone rather than just kind of randomly applying to companies, right?
Yeah, because you rather get to know them on you rather, it's more of a friendship at that point, I think, and you can really know how those people are. And I think that's always great. You're going to work with those people for at least 8 hours a day. So it's good to know that you're getting along as well. So I definitely agree with that. And also, I think if you have the opportunity to be involved in the community directly, like maybe be a co-organizer of something, that's of course going to help as well. And that's going to get you in touch with so many people. And
what do you guys think about LinkedIn as a platform which can, potentially help you? What do you guys think about that?
I'm always kind of mixed about that, because I think the happiest people that work in tech, I find, are people that work in the kind of tech area that they're passionate about, but also in an industry that they care about, right? You can be you can have an iOS development job, but you might work in an industry that you really don't care about, right? If you're an iOS developer at an oil company, maybe that's something you really don't care about, right? Well, if you could have worked at a retail company that you do care about, you would be way happier. Despite, if you kind of look at it from a few steps back, you would think, hey, you do the same thing, right? You write Swift code and you ship apps. But I think it's often a combination of using technology that you enjoy working with and that you feel like you have skills to contribute, but also in a space that you either care about or you're interested in or even passionate if you're really lucky. So I, on average, wouldn't recommend people to just apply for any kind of iOS development job if they have any choice, right? Most larger cities probably have a few options. If you're in some kind of super small town or there's not a lot going on, then obviously you don't have that flexibility. But if you do, I would always recommend people to apply for jobs in industries they care about, because then you always have that other thing to fall back to during an interview as well, right?
But maybe initially the person is not aware about in which industry he's interested to work in. Maybe he's just an iOS enthusiast who just want his first job. So what should they do? Like, should they care about the industry, or should they start off with their first job in whichever industry they get it?
I think, sorry, you can answer, okay?
Yeah, it's always both, right? Getting your first job is super important. So whatever first job you can get is probably a good option. But if there's not an easy way, like if you don't know someone who's like, look, we're looking for a nice developer, do you want to join us? Take it, right? If it's your first job, I would always say take the first job, because you'll learn a lot more. You might even learn things that you don't want, right? If you've never had a job in tech, you don't know what you like and what you don't like, most likely. But if you don't have that and you have to put effort in and you have to apply for jobs, I would always recommend applying for jobs in industries that if you're into cricket and there is a Indian cricket app that is for a specific tournament or something, and they're hiring, that would be way better for you to apply for than a basketball app, right? Because you don't care about basketball, you do care about cricket. So during the interview, you at least have that as a fallback, right? If there's a tech question you feel shaky about, you at least can show you're passionate about cricket and know your skills. Knowing about how cricket, right? If someone would pay me to make a cricket app, that would be terrible. I have the technology skills, but I don't know anything about the game. So how would I make a great cricket app? While you have the skills and you know about cricket, so you're way better equipped to solve that problem.
And you would probably even use the app yourself. And I think that is also just making you a better candidate if you're a person who actually enjoys the app and would be a user of it.
So I think it's important to get your foot in the door into the industry at all. But if you can try to find something that you're at least interested in, both for the interview process, but also for your day-to-day work.
Yeah, and I think with that as well, if you are in an area, like if you live in an area and there aren't that many jobs, but you know of companies that you are particularly passionate about, maybe there is a cricket company that is making an app, but they are not hiring at the moment, then I think it's at least good to reach out to them, even if that might not be a job that you get first, at least have a connection with them and chat with them and say
you may get an internship, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so I think it's always good to sort of go where you're passionate and try to reach out to those people, because then I think them as an employer would probably also appreciate that you want to work with them specifically. So I think once they have
a good way of making up, especially if you're new in the industry, you're probably lacking certain skills, but you can make up for it with passion and knowledge about the industry potentially. Well, if you work in an industry that you don't know with a tech stack you don't know, it's just, I've seen people being a lot less confident about their job, and it takes them longer to kind of get comfortable.
And the person is almost lost. Like
exactly.
Right.
I don't want to contradict what you suggested, Kai, because I do agree. Like, you should look for something that you're passionate about the industry. But I do think a tip that I would give to people who haven't interviewed for a job before is to try to get an interview with a job that you don't want first.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I think it would be a lot more intimidating. Let's say your dream job is to work at Apple, and that's the first tech interview that you ever have. You're going to be a lot more nervous for that, because you don't know what to expect in an interview scenario in general.
That's
so
right.
If you can apply, even if Apple is the dream job you want to get, if you can apply for some other jobs before, either you end up really liking that and you end up getting that job. That's good, because then you have that as another option if you don't get the Apple job. But if not, then you at least have the experience of interviewing for something else before you go for your dream job.
Right. Kai has control. Okay, the question was about the job, the things that you did, and how you decided to move on to the next gig. Was it a business idea, and was it the next job that you decided to go with?
So for me, it was, I think I mentioned earlier that the city we lived in was pretty small. So we lived in Perth, Australia, and it's a nice city, but we felt like we wanted to be a bit more in like a bigger city in general. So we decided that we want to move to Sydney, which is definitely bigger and a bit more known city. I think most people are familiar with Sydney.
Even I know the name. Okay.
So it was a lot about that. So then I started looking for 4 different jobs in Sydney, and then I came across one that I thought was seemed really fun. It was a company called ABC, which is Australian Broadcasting Corporation.
Okay.
Where they were working on a lot of, since Swift was still new there were not that many companies working with Swift as a code base. So I did actually work with Objective-C in the first job that I had. But this job was starting to make some new apps. So they want to build those with Swift. So I thought that would be fun as well. And also be fun of a team that starts building a new app from scratch. Rather than like working in a legacy code base. I think it's quite fun to start with a product and also be able to be involved in the product from an early stage and really see through it with like everything from like what the product is doing to what the design is like to accessibility features in the app and to the app and the programming part itself. So I always really try to like be as involved as possible as I can in those different areas, and I thought that was something I could be with like a new app. So that's how I ended up there.
How about you?
And for me, when we moved to Sydney, it was mostly through Malin's job, and I just kept my old job and did it from Sydney remotely. Okay. Until at some point, a friend of mine contacted me and saying, I have friends, they're looking for someone doing apps, iOS development, you should meet them. And it was a large company. I was like, okay.
This feels like the same thing as the first job.
Yeah. And so I was not really looking for a new job. I was pretty happy to kind of work on my own projects on the side and doing kind of freelance work as well. Okay. So that was kind of once we moved to Sydney, it was essentially freelance work plus kind of.
So was it this moving to Sydney that made you think of let's go with my idea, or was it like?
No, I always worked on kind of small hobby projects. Even before, like when I started my first job, I already started like before my first day. I already built some web stuff because I wanted to experiment with it. So it was always kind of.
What kind of apps did you make in the very beginning, and what was the idea behind it? Like what was the main intention?
My first app was a parcel tracking app. You know, when you order something, you get a tracking number, and it always bothered me. I'm kind of weirdly obsessive with those things. It always bothered me how infrequent you would get updates. So I built
like push notifications.
Updates. I want to get the update as soon as possible. So I just built something where I had a backend that would kind of crawl the APIs, the carrier APIs every few minutes based on some kind of heuristics, and then sends a push notification as soon as the parcel status would update. And it was pretty cool because sometimes, I don't know if that happens in India as well, but sometimes you have a UPS notification that you weren't home, but you were home. But now when I had this thing that would just send me a notification immediately, I could actually run to the front door and still see the truck and actually
yell at them
and actually receive the delivery. So that was kind of fun. And it's also because I work from home sometimes, and I did order a lot of things. It was kind of nice. I felt like I could take a walk in the middle of the day, and I would get a push notification as soon as the delivery was attempted, and I would still make it back in time. So that's kind of the first project I worked on. It was just fairly simple. A few table views. I mean, the backend was all written in PHP and just very cobbled together.
I mean, in the beginning, most of the projects in the iOS specifically are 80% table view. And the rest.
I mean, you can do a lot with the table view too.
Right.
Right. But it was fairly simple. But it was something I wanted to have, and it was a good way of learning. Like the whole process, right? How to build a backend API, how to build a PHP server, how to deploy that, how to manage that.
So you were managing all these ends, like you were managing the backend as well?
Yeah, and I built a website for it as well. So I kind of just wanted to have all those things. So I figured might as well learn them as I built them. And in general, that's always how I like learning new tech things, to have a problem that I'm actually trying to solve.
So Kai, you started off with learning the backend at that point when you started off with this project, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So what did you start with? Did you start with Node.js or something, or did you start with Vapor? Or
no, I started off with PHP. That was
PHP.
This was, I think this would have been
in a company that I worked for at the time. Their entire kind of most of their client projects had some PHP component. So I thought it made sense to use PHP because then I'd be able to use some of the skills that I learned for work as well. And it was PHP for a while because I didn't see a huge reason to move off, because I knew PHP at that point and kind of did what I needed. Vapor project started later on when I felt like, all right, it's time to move off from PHP and use something more fun. But then back to the second job. It was then I went to that kind of interview after the friend said, hey, you should meet those people in this large company. And I was like, I should at least go to the interview. I wasn't looking for anything, but I should at least say hello and introduce myself. Worst case, I get to know some new people in Sydney because we moved there fairly recently, right? So I thought it would be fun. And I went to interview, and they were kind of nice. They convinced me that sounds kind of fun. And a few days later, they sent me a job offer.
Okay, so they convinced you that this is going to be fun, and you were almost like, let's give it a try only. Let's see. Okay.
And it was also at that point I didn't exactly know what the team structure would turn into. So what it ended up actually being is that I was the kind of first mobile lead, and then later like the technology lead. So I was actually in charge of a larger team, which at the time was kind of crazy to me because I felt like I was still fairly new to the industry, and all of a sudden that was a huge, $1 billion company.
I think this has to do with that imposter syndrome, which everyone feels, because we always feel like we know less than the other bunch of people who are there along with us, who are working with us.
Yeah, for me, it wasn't even that, because I've only done iOS development for like a few years at that point, like 2 years or something.
Right.
It just felt like I didn't feel like I wouldn't do all right at the job. I just thought, why are those crazy people considering someone who's fairly recently gone into iOS development to lead their entire team?
Then you can imagine how would be the junior developers, like how much experience would they be having when they have.
That's the weird thing. There were junior developers that had more experience than me. I mean, it worked all right. I mean, I worked with a lot of people, and because it was more of a management role and a lot of kind of just purely technical tasks, I did think I did really well at that job.
But I'd say, like, even if it would have been technical tasks too, I think you always had you had even if you were focusing on iOS at that point, I think you have always been very interested in like the broader technology spectrum.
Yeah.
And I think that's why you were the perfect person to communicate between all these different teams as well. And you're also interested in the business part and in the product itself. So I think that
I was kind of a full stack developer by wanting to build things that are not just iOS apps, right? I always had a passion for the Apple ecosystem, and that's where I want to spend most of my time. But I always, all the projects that I thought of, I wanted to actually build were always including server components. So I was kind of, I wouldn't have called myself a full stack developer, but realistically I was. But I wanted to spend more time on iOS. So then I kind of worked there, and then we kind of started building a team, and that was fun too. But it was very different from the initial kind of, it was very rampant from like, I know nothing and I became a developer to I don't know anything and now I'm a tech lead or like a engineering manager. All of that went very fast.
So Kai, what do you think is the reason behind, hiring you in a management role come technical role? So what do you think is the reason behind that?
Why they hired me, or
why do you think is the reason behind hiring you as a technical lead and not just as a developer?
I think it kind of happened. I think they were after someone who could build things, but someone who ideally could grow in the role of managing the team, because they needed an app built kind of at that point, right? They actually needed someone who can build an app. I could do that. But I also, I believe that they had the plans to actually grow that team. And they thought, cool, if Kai will grow into that role, perfect. If not, we can hire someone else later. I think that was kind of their mindset. And I'm a bit of a pain sometimes because I do like to be super involved in everything, right? Okay. If you would tell me you're just building the app and you don't care about the design, that wouldn't work for me.
Yeah, I think you would. If someone told you that, you would leave at that point.
I would. I mean, so far everyone appreciated it.
I know.
I've not worked at a job where I wouldn't attend every single design meeting. It's just something I care a lot about. If I build something on iOS, I want to make sure that we're building the right thing, and building it the right way. It's just I tend to always care about the full picture, not just my very tight sliver of tech. I always want to make sure we build the right thing. We're solving actual problems. We're building it in a correct way. We're doing it while kind of using all the good platform features that we have, but also build something that's genuinely fun and delightful to use, and not something that's cumbersome or gets in the way, or it's just unnecessary complex, right? Sometimes if you don't have a lot of collaboration between design and engineering, sometimes you have designs that are just slightly different from kind of what you would get from UI kit. And it creates a lot of work, but maybe the design team just didn't realize that this small change would create like an extra week of work. So I always thought it was important for me also to have that, because there were designers that had a lot of design expertise, but they obviously weren't developers. And I was a developer that had some design, I would say, intuition, and that together just worked way better than if it's kind of siloed. So I always kind of worked that way, and that kind of naturally fitted into the role of kind of leading and managing the team, because I was always, even in the company before that, I didn't think of it that way, but I was always involved in design and meeting with clients and building the front end and building the back end. It was just always something I was drawn to, because to me it was more about, let's build a product, and tech is a tool to get there, rather than saying I'm just this iOS developer who writes code based on Jira tickets. That's just where I was drawn, and I think that's why it worked so well in that position, because it was kind of almost designed for someone who wants to be involved in the whole product.
Like, your approach has always been to be more than just a developer. You think about all the aspects.
It's more about being more. It's more about just being involved in everything. And I just think it's more motivating to develop something if I agree with the general direction of what we're developing. I think I saw that it was already like, I think if I would develop something that doesn't actually make sense for the platform, then that wouldn't be enjoyable to do. I think I really need to agree with the product in general and the way that the product is going to work. And I think that's why I'm similar to Kai. I've also been very interested in being across those different parts, because I think sometimes you might not think about the platform specifics for a product, but I think that is really important. And I think that's why I really care about making sure that we're building something that feels great for the iPhone or for whatever platform we're making.
But I also think it's just very important in general to focus on the product you want to build rather than only focusing on specific tech things. I'm not a fan of optimizing something to the craziest extent because you want to optimize it to the craziest extent, right? Look if there are actually problems you're solving, because otherwise you might be way better rather than making sure your sorting algorithm does it in 0.1 millisecond instead of 0.2. You're not 50% saving. It's a huge saving, but doesn't matter. Or could you have spent those 4 weeks on something that would actually help your customers or your users or your team, right? There's so many other areas. I think that's always important and should be something that teams that work on products should always have in mind, that kind of trade-off of where do we spend the time, what is the best thing to spend our time on, and what actually leads us to the results we're after. And I think if you have that, it's usually way more fulfilling. I think all the teams that we kind of structured people were often surprised how involved they were in all the different facets of development. And they really got into it, right? Because some of them were kind of before that very solid, and now they got to be involved in the design and they learn some things. And they sometimes you learn the background of certain design decision, and that helps you implement it because you don't only implement what you want to build right now, but because you're kind of were part of the development of the design, you know why certain decisions are being made. And you can build things so they're easier for the next steps that you know are upcoming, rather than just building this one feature right now and then there's the next feature and you didn't know, right? And now you have to refactor everything because you couldn't build kind of looking one step ahead. And I think there's a lot of benefits in those kind of things.
Yeah, and I think that's that sort of applies in a way, just to add to your point, Kai, that I think even if people might be developers and they want to focus on the technical implementation bit, and they might not feel like they're going to sit down in Sketch and make a design themselves. I think to your point, Kai, actually being involved in that is still going to help you be more motivated in what you're implementing, and also get an understanding of why you're building it in a certain way. I think you jumped ahead a bit, Kai. I think I just want to mention that once Kai joined that company, this sounds the same as with the studies, but Kai convinced me as well, and I saw the team from what he was talking about and what all the things he described made it seemed really interesting. And they were also looking for someone to sort of lead the iOS team at that point. So then I ended up joining as well. So that's why Kai has been talking about us for a while now. So then we ended up sort of building teams together and really sort of creating a collaborative environment where people worked across, or at least were involved across multiple disciplines, and were able to get an understanding of where the product was going, not just rely on a Jira ticket and those things.
So let's just shift some gears and move on to the next thing, which is how did you guys decided to move on from that job? Basically, I don't know, did you try to get another job after that or not? But how did you shift your gears to moving on to Canada? Why Canada? And what was the reason behind that?
We didn't like the heat, so we had...
I don't believe in that reason.
No, I'm kidding. I think already when we moved to Australia, we were thinking which English-speaking countries could we potentially move to, and then we actually looked at Canada at that point. But a reason why we didn't move to Canada already then was because of the cold weather. So that's why we tried Australia. But I think it was a lot about, even though there are many positives with it being sort of far away and having that community, we did still feel like it was a bit too far from the tech industry in general. We thought we wanted to rather be a bit closer to that, so that's why we thought Canada seemed like a really, really great place. And also in terms of Vancouver or Canada in general, but Vancouver in particular are care a lot about renewable, like renewable energy, or like they care a lot about
immigration.
Immigration.
Australia, at a time when we decided that we want to move, Australia tried to make immigration harder, and we always thought immigration is something that you can draw strength from rather than something where you try to keep people away. And Canada is a very good example of a very welcoming immigration system and a very welcoming society. So we thought that was kind of fitting us better, because it's in the end, it's not one decision, right? Or one thing that made us decide to because the job we had in Australia was really good. We liked the team, we liked the company, it was fun. We earned a good amount of money, but we knew that culturally Australia was never feeling like home. And that was in a lot of ways. It's like day-to-day culture. We always we were very excessive workers. I think there are not a lot of weeks where we work like 40 hours or less. That's just not a thing we do. We usually work 60 hours or more. We like working on weekends. We like to run meetups. We like to be involved in the community. We like to do things outside of work that are related to tech. So we're kind of very passionate about those kind of areas of what we're working on, but also culturally, as far as like the sports go and kind of the kind of society goals and those kind of things.
I think that's what I was trying to say, like societally or like socially. I think there were many things that were appealing in Vancouver. People care a lot about like the outdoors around here and about the environment and those things. And I think,
but also silly other things, like we don't care about Australian football or rugby or cricket, but we do care. Like I used to play a lot of basketball. We were both liking American football, so there were like also those areas where it's just like being part of society. We weren't interested in going to football games in Australia, but we've been to football games every week in Canada once that season was going. And also just proximity to
I think this is the contrary of society. Like there is one society that makes you feel like you are the people of, or you are the, this belongs to you, like that nation belongs to you. The society makes you feel like that. And there's on the contrary, there's a society which makes you feel like you are somebody who has just come to this country for your personal goals, and you are still an outsider. So I think
I think there were definitely like we still have lots of friends in Australia, and like there were people who had similar interests to us, but I think in general there were just many things. Like, I mean, you don't have to like attend all the local sports events, but it is fun if you can actually be involved in that way as well, and really sort of feel like it's your city in that way that
Sydney always felt a bit like we were there and people were welcoming, but we felt like it wasn't quite our fit. It didn't fit with our goals. It didn't fit with it's hard to put that in words because it's so many, like it's 1,000 small things that add up to like, when we looked at our, like evaluated our situation and we thought, would we be happy if we would still be here in 10 years? We decided that we didn't. And if we don't think we want to be there in 10 years, why would we want to be there in 10 days? Right. So that was kind of our mindset. So then we thought, all right, let's move to Canada and let's evaluate that, because we're still young. We can move places. There's tech in Vancouver. People need developers anywhere, so might as well give it a shot. Now.
Yeah, and we also felt like if we're not trying it at that point, we are always going to wonder, like, should we have tried something other than
maybe
Australia?
You would be there, ending up there, living there only, and still not satisfied.
And like it's not a bad place to be either, but I just feel like, as Kai said, like we are still young, so we can very much like move around, and even if we
like you guys told me about being in Canada, like you feel like there's a good vibe there. You just told me that, and when we were last talking about this, so
and culturally it feels like a lot more our place. In general, North America is more culturally aligned. Like we have more friends that we're watching sports with because we're kind of into the sports, and people locally here, like it's sometimes that you're like, if you go to a supermarket in Australia, sometimes people want to talk about cricket. We're like, I don't know anything about cricket.
Okay.
And it's such small things. But here, sometimes people are like, hey, you're watching the game tonight. And we're like, yeah, we are. And we're kind of just small talk. And it just feels like we're more part of society here. And it sounds kind of weird, but it just feels more like we're more arrived at a place that suits us than we had in Australia.
All right. So let's move on to the next thing, which is, sorry guys. Yeah, which is, let me do my hair as well. Okay. Which is that, see, Kai, when you were talking about the product and you guys were there in the same company, okay, you can do that. You guys were there in the same company and you were running almost the core technology part, like you were the leads, right? So when you were talking about that, both of you were so passionate about being into that product, feeling that product, and being into the every aspect of the product. So you told me about the product that you guys have made, which is Orbit, right? Which is basically a time tracker app for those who work. Maybe a freelancer can use it, maybe a lawyer, as you told me, lawyers are using it, and many other kind of people who makes, who feel like that this app is for them, they can use it. So I think this is something which has been originated just because of that enthusiasm which you guys have for being into a product, right?
Yeah. That and the fact that like we could just not find any good time tracking invoicing apps for the Mac.
Because for us, we always did freelance work to kind of bridge gaps. Like when we're like, all right, maybe we should move somewhere else. Freelance work has this kind of unique feature to it that you can move with it, right? If you have a full-time job, usually, I mean, that's kind of shifting a little bit now, but traditionally, if you have a job and you move, you have to find a new job. Freelance work has this unique feature that you could move to a different place in the world and you might still continue with the work you already have. And that gives you a lot of flexibility. So we always like doing some freelance work. Even if we had other jobs, we always try to maintain some kind of freelance relationships and work a little bit on that. So we needed something where we just track time and then send invoices for that, because that's what we've been doing a lot. And all the options that we looked at, we weren't quite happy with. They either didn't care about the Mac app anymore because they moved fully towards the web. And we obviously work 99% of the time we work on Macs. So we wanted something that's nice on the Mac. We wanted something on iOS that uses all the new features. We want to have a widget that shows you the time you're tracking, because that's a nice thing, right? You just check your phone and you see a running timer there. So it was kind of that we thought, all right, first of all, we can find something that we're truly happy with. And I'm sure there are other people that are in the same situation. And second of all, SwiftUI just came out and we thought, all right, we want to learn SwiftUI, but as we mentioned multiple times throughout our chat so far, the best way for us to learn a new thing is to actually have a problem we want to solve. So we thought, perfect. We do not know macOS development. We don't know SwiftUI. So let's combine.
Let's learn both of them at the same time.
Yeah, while building an app that we actually want to use. And that's kind of how the
and with that, we were able to do like all those different areas. To get back to your point, that we were able to be in charge of the design of the app and in charge of what the app should actually do in the first place, and the development and what we choose to use to build the app. And we could very much like we like to do that whole part ourselves and really be able to like create a complete product. And I think that's why like it's been such a fun project as well. And like also extending that, not just being Mac app, also being an iOS app and an iPadOS app. I just think I just think it's like it was a great way of working on a product, like an entire product as well.
But it's also fun because we use it ourselves. So every improvement we're making kind of makes our kind of other income easier to do as well. And every time we send an invoice, we're like, hey, this would be nice to make those kind of changes, and we can actually make them and roll them out to everyone. So
I was just about to say, like for a while there, I think we had like 3 releases for the invoice generation feature that sort of came out of Kai and I just needing to send an invoice to someone. And then we were in the way of like creating that invoice. And then we noticed, oh, this feature is not really like we wanted to. And then we ended up tweaking that and changing it. And that ended up being a new build for everyone to be able to use.
Has there been instances like the client is asking you to make some changes in the invoices? Like maybe he found something which is missing or he wants something to be there. And you just...
Most of the things were more on our side where we're like, hey, why wouldn't it make the kind of generation of all the line items? Why can't we round it to the closest 6 minutes or something, right? That's really common. And why do we have to manually tweak that? So we added rounding,
or why don't we have like we noticed that we want to add the same notes to all of the invoices to the same clients, and then we realized obviously we should add copy and paste here.
Right, for the notes. Or Malin and I worked on some projects together, and we wanted the line items on the invoice to say Kai worked 40 hours, Malin worked 45 hours, rather than it kind of being one bunch or kind of completely split out. We just want to sort them by kind of person that tracks time. So we built that. So it's always those kind of things where we're like, that would be nice, a nice addition that would make our life easier. And then we release it. And sometimes people really like it. Like the invoice rounding was something that we actually got the week we released that, we had multiple people emailing us. I was like, oh, that rounding that is so nice. And it's so nice to that on the invoice rather than doing it on the time entry. So those kind of things. It's just kind of fun to be able to solve your own problems while also thinking about how will that solve problems for other people.
Can you guys please just tell me how many hours do you guys work in a week?
It varies.
Yeah.
The benefit is we're super flexible, right? So if there is, for example, if there is WWDC, right? It's been announced now for the 7th of June.
Just basically guys, basically this is vacation for these guys, WWDC. And
like if you don't count the time we spent on WWDC, we'll probably only work an extra, 30 hours that week on other things, right? If you would add it all up, it would probably be a lot more than that. But we like that we're super flexible. So if there's something that's coming up where we're like, hey, we really want to do this thing, we're always in a situation where we can do it. But I'd say if we have a week where we're just fully dedicating it to work, we're probably doing, 60, 70, 80 hours a week. Because we usually work 7 days a week anyways. We're trying to not be too strict. Like if you're not motivated a day and you only work 6 hours, that's fine. We're not like trying to hold ourselves accountable.
I was gonna say, I also think it's not that much. I don't think necessarily the amount of hours is gonna make you a lot more a lot better at what you're doing. I think sometimes you need to, like, sometimes Kai and I take a walk and we talk about what we want to do or what we want to build. And I think that I would consider that to some extent work as well, because you're still sort of considering and planning the features and those things. But even if you don't want to do that, if you just want some time off to play video games, that can be helpful as well, because you sort of step away from it. So I don't think you necessarily should aim for working a lot of hours, but it just happened that Kai and I, since we are working on things together, we don't really see it as taking away from our personal life a lot, because we are, it's like we are spending time with each other as we're working on Orbit anyways. So,
but it's also fun for us, right? It's like a hobby.
Yeah.
And at the moment, going outside with the pandemic is something that doesn't happen as much, right? There's no sports games to go to or catching up with friends outside as much. So it's also a good way of bridging the time that you, like, for us at least, it's a good way of taking our mind off everything else that's going on and just building fun things that are fun to use for us and fun to use for others. And it's just
like this is something that I find that might, lead you to boredom at some point of time. But since you are doing it right now and you are able to think about the new features and the improvements that you can make in the application, that is something I think that makes you keeps you interested in the process, right? Like Kai, you just said that we are also, this is fun for you guys. So I think the reason behind that fun is maybe you are constantly looking into the new features, the improvements that you can do in the application.
But it's not even just that, right? It's also like if I'm kind of bored of programming for a day, or there's a difficult problem that I just can't figure out how to solve, I don't have to keep banging my head at the keyboard until it's solved, right? I can say, all right, that means I go and maybe improve the website, or I write a how to get started guide for people, or we send a newsletter, or we're trying to tweak some of our marketing efforts. It's always
that's the
ability to do a lot of different things that I feel like keeps you fresher, because you don't just do one thing until you're super exhausted. It's like whenever you feel like, all right, I'm done with this, there are other things that are still building our product, and they're still fun, but they're not just pure programming. So,
and I think that and I think that really sort of takes away the fatigue potential as well. The fact that you do change it up, you do have, like, especially when we do all the design ourselves, we have a lot of things related to that, or the marketing, like just things that are sort of related to making an app, but not necessarily sitting and programming. Because I think even if you have a problem that you're trying to solve, it's good to step away from that sometimes as well.
So what do you guys think about Orbit? Like, where do you see it in next 5 years, or what is your intention behind taking it forward in the near future, right?
5 years is a long time. I think we released about 6 months ago.
Okay, we released it. For some background, we released the first macOS version, I think, a week before WWDC 2019. So I think it was in late June.
No, 2020.
Oh, 2020. Yeah, that was a year. I forgot about that year.
Not even a year.
Yeah, so less than a year ago. And then we released iOS app in October. I think 1 week after iOS 14 was released, because we were given. We didn't make the 24-hour notice, but we're happy to have it out.
Okay.
But yeah, so I think 5 years feels like a really long time when we're talking in that way. Did you want to answer the question, Kai?
Yes. So we have a whole bunch of things that are kind of immediate that we want to do over the next few weeks. That feel like, in general, we don't want to have too long-term planning. We're very particular about having a direction that we want to go into,
right?
But we don't want to make plans that are so far out that they will be deprecated by the time we get there anyways, right? For us, it makes no sense to plan that far ahead. We definitely want to maintain this long term, but we're kind of thinking more of kind of what do we want to do next, and what is our general direction, and then we're kind of evaluating that against that, right?
And I think along that route, we also have general features, like the bigger features where that could change the direction of the product. So I think there are certain things that we're thinking would make sense with it, but we just want to see first, like, what we are passionate about making, and also what makes sense for our users and for the people who are who need features as well. So I think that's why we sort of keep it on we try to focus a lot on like the immediate, probably like 6 months to 1 year stuff. And I think to get back to what you said, Kai, I think we have a few things within the next sort of 3 months, which are related to like making sure that people can test the app easier. And that's something we've been noticing.
Let me add some context to what I was saying, like in terms of the question that I asked, is that I was not just talking about the new features that you're going to put into it. I'm just also talking about how do you see the future of the application in terms of numbers, in terms of reach it is going to have in, let's say X number of years, if not 5 years.
When we started Orbit, the goal was that we have that as something that can grow to about, even if it's just when we started out, we thought if we get to 1,000 paying users, we're charging $9 a month, so $9,000. That would be enough of a baseline that it's kind of replacing a full-time salary. Right. And based on our cost of living, something that is a very good baseline on which we can then build whatever we want next. So we wanted something that kind of allows us to tackle more ambitious things while having a baseline. So it's essentially taking out some of the time we spent on freelancing and replacing it with Orbit income. So there are a few things that we want to do there to kind of get to that point. I mean, we definitely want to grow it past that, right? If someone's if there are 10,000 people or 100,000, that is definitely great. But for us, the kind of immediate goal is grow to a point where it's sustainable for us to spend a good amount of time on it, but also allow us to tackle our next project, because there are a lot of things that we want to work on that might take more than the 6 months or 4 months that it took us to build Orbit initially.
Okay.
There are kind of more ambitious projects that we have in mind in the future. And it would be great if Orbit can help us finance the next thing, because we've always been a bit reluctant to take on VC funding. We've always thought if we can finance it ourselves by either financing it through freelance and building something ourselves, or ideally if Orbit grows to a certain level, use Orbit money to finance our next project. That would be ideal.
And that was sort of the idea behind Orbit as well. We wanted it to be a bootstrapped thing that can continue growing. And that's why we are, to get back to like the features, when we're trying to think of what features we want to have, we're really trying to iterate on it and make sure that we can provide something that makes more people interested in using Orbit. But we're hoping to like grow that to a point where that's something that can like help us for other things.
But we also genuinely think that what we've built and what we're building over the next few months is better than anything else out there. So I do also think that it is not unreasonable that we could get a good chunk of the market, because there are a bunch of competitors, but realistically, most of the apps are not great. They're actually surprisingly bad because like most of the kind of bigger competitors that we're competing against, they have teams of like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 people or more. And we're two people sitting here, and we can make a lot of the parts of the app or of the software as a whole nicer than they can. So I also think, considering how far we've gotten in the last 6 months, the next 6 months should get us into a point where I think we can also start to probably seriously compete with some of the larger players, which would be fun. It's just fun players, David versus Goliath kind of thing, where I do think we're moving faster, we're adopting all the new features faster, and I think there's a lot of value in that. And that puts us in a good position, I believe.
So this is for both of you, like anyone of you can choose to answer it first, which is like, you guys have been developing this product, right? So how many months did you guys take to release the first version of the application?
I think 3.
I think it was about almost 4, but that included a backend and the website and the marketing material as well.
Okay, so it was, I assume it was 4. So how did you planned all these things right before jumping onto the development part? And what do you think is the difficulty behind building a tech startup? Because see, personally, what I believe is it is quite easy in terms of building a tech startup in comparison to something which is available offline, right? There is a lot of groundwork that is required in the offline job, right? In the offline business that you run. But when it comes to technology, it completely depends on the person, how he thinks, how he look at the market, how he look at the need of the market, and all those things. So what was it exactly? Just take me a walk through to that.
I mean, for us, it was a lot, to get back to it again, like it was a lot about us needing the app, but I think we also felt like we tried a lot of different apps, and we also noticed that there was nothing that was like perfect for macOS that we wanted. And with that, we sort of knew that there were many other people who do freelance work or who need to track their time in general. And that's why we felt like it was an app that made sense to do in the first place. It also felt like it's not a new concept, right? It's something that is like, people need to track their time. People need to do it in like a nice way, but usually like everything is pretty convoluted. So I think that was already sort of enough of a reason for us to get started with it.
But also, I think for us, it was that we care about the Mac a lot. Like we use the Mac every day. We're very passionate about the Mac. We want the Mac. There are certain things in Mac apps that we want that are often overlooked, and a lot of services going towards the web. We thought, hey, we should actually make something nice for the Mac. And realistically, it's often hard to compete on iOS because there's such a flood of apps, right? There are millions and millions and millions of apps on the App Store, on the iOS and iPadOS App Store, and probably hundreds or thousands of new app submissions every day. So it's really hard to get any kind of attention there because you're just in this sea of apps. And even if you would say, all right, let's only filter for kind of productivity apps, there are probably still hundreds of them per day. And if you then keep filtering down and saying, all right, anything that's related to time, there's probably still 50 50 that are being submitted every day, right? It's just such a crowded market.
So
we thought, if we focus our efforts on the Mac, first of all, realistically, how many new Mac apps are being submitted, right?
Right.
Two a day, and that's already a busy day, right? I'm sure there are some, but it's just such a small trickle in comparison to iOS. So we thought, if we knew that at some point we wanted our app available on all platforms, that's why we wanted to build in SwiftUI, right? To kind of stress test that promise on stage that you learn this framework once and you use it everywhere.
Right.
But we thought, starting on the Mac, first of all, it solves our immediate need. And second of all, it is a way better platform to get attention on. And
so I think that's in two ways. It's both from the users. If someone's looking for an app on the Mac, they will be able to find a time tracking app easier because it's fewer players there. And even if, I think when you search on the iOS App Store, you might not always find the exact search term you're looking for. So we just thought that would make it easier, but also in terms of getting attention from like Apple or from press and those things as well. So we were actually lucky to be fortunate to be featured as soon as we released the app on macOS, and we were in the apps and games we love right now category, and we stayed on the first page for I think 2 or 3 weeks.
Nice.
And that's just sort of a testimony. I think that just shows that like that's not being updated as often. Whereas if you're on iOS, I think you reach more people from being featured, of course, but you're not going to stay there for as long. It might only be like a 1 day or 1 week
there
thing.
are no features really that would, all the new new apps, they're there for a day or two. You're not going to be there for long. And also, as far as press outreach, we reach out to some press outlets with our press kit, and iMore and 9to5 Mac and Mac Rumors and some others actually did write stories about our app launch.
And we also know
that again, they don't have a lot of new Mac apps to write about, right? It's kind of unique to have something that's an actual Mac app.
And we also noticed that many people, like when we were tweeting about it and talking about sort of our experience using SwiftUI as well, I think many people were interested in checking the app out because there weren't that many SwiftUI apps on the Mac at that point either. So just from that, I think many people were just happy to like check it out. And then we actually went to some like meetups during WWDC 2 weeks after we released, and then people recognized the logo because like they had seen it on the Mac and on the Mac app stores. I thought that was really cool.
But that kind of brings it back to your question, right? So the hard things for us, we knew would be marketing, because we knew we can build a functional app. We could build a nice looking app. We can make a fairly nice looking product page. We knew we could do customer support. We could make things that work. We could make an app that financially is solid, right? We know how to properly deal with taxes and how to do money math properly, because we've done that for a long time before, right? We knew how to do money related math within Foundation and within Apple's framework. So we were very confident in all of that part. Marketing was the one we thought would be challenging. So that was one of the reasons we thought, if we go Mac OS first, that will make our life a little bit easier. And now, after
there is less competition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then as we moved past the initial launch period, we realized, yes, in fact, marketing is difficult. We had this kind of initial wave, but we struggled keeping that up. So that's kind of where we are at the moment because now we're still featured in the Canadian App Store and in some other countries every now and then, but kind of the big bang feature that we had in the early days, that is obviously not going to sustain. So now we're actually in a period where we're experimenting a lot with our own marketing efforts, which is a combination of like writing on Twitter about what we're doing some paid advertisement on social media platforms to kind of experiment what works, what doesn't work, doing some search ads on Apple's platform, and kind of trying to figure out how do we optimize that to actually,
are you guys thinking about going into marketing through the social media platform in terms of the influencers that are there in the market?
So what we're doing at the moment is just kind of traditional ads on those, but we're definitely considering at some point soon-ish to look into things like micro-influencers. I mean, we don't our marketing budget isn't at a point where we could get Michael Jordan to talk about our product.
I don't think Michael Jordan would consider himself a Michael micro-influencer.
You know, you could have a totally an ad about his airtime. That would totally work for us. Anyways, we would definitely have to go. We want to go smaller and kind of micro-influencers.
Right.
But it's also we were surprised about the industries that picked up Orbit initially. We thought it's people like us, right? Developers, designers working on a Mac. But we've had a lot more natural kind of organic growth within the space of law, like lawyers and law-related occupations like paralegals and those kind of job professions that we didn't expect, that we didn't target, but they kind of found us. So that's also something we didn't want to put too much money towards a specific goal before we get a better idea of how do people use it, what do we, how do they use it, who are they, and why did they pick us over something else? Because I think that helps you a lot with then targeting more people like those in your advertising.
Are you planning to think through their perspective as well, like the lawyer's perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking. Yeah, we also been talking to them a lot and see what they are needing. The time rounding was something that many lawyers specifically told us afterwards that they really appreciated. So there are definitely things like that, and I think then when it comes to like advertisement as well, we're really trying to see if we can like reach those people and like find the people who really will need the app. But I think we were surprised about like how wide the array of how wide of a range it is of different industries needing time tracking apps.
Like we have a lot of people that work in creative fields, like music producers and actors. And that was something I didn't realize, that some actors are being paid by the hour, right?
Yeah.
But we actually had people that are not like superstar actors, right? They're just in background scenes or kind of
junior artists, you can call it, maybe.
Yeah, but they often, like one person that we've been in touch with a lot, they just start a timer when they arrive on set on their phone, and they have it running, and then they stop it once they leave the set again. And it's just something that we haven't thought of. And I think there's a lot of value in knowing who you're trying to target with your ads before you spend a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
We didn't want to make a $50,000 investment to then learn that those ads didn't work at all, right? We wanted something where we felt like we're fairly confident that this will work. Then we spent like small kind of $100 ad campaigns until we find something that seems to work, and then we double it and see if that works. And if that works, we double it again, and if that still works, we double it again, right?
And that's something we do in terms of like the artwork that we're experimenting with as well, because like your ads will work in different ways. Like you can add your different like text to it and your different artwork and those things. And that was something we experimented with as well, because I think when we read a bit about marketing, many people, like many of the big examples were like very holistic, and you really want to sort of create a message around what your app is. But what we noticed was that many people clicked our apps, but then they weren't willing to pay. They clicked our ads, but then they weren't willing to pay $7.99. So we thought maybe we should be more clear about that up front. So we really like did those incremental experiments where we tested different type of ads, tested different that's artwork point, and those things.
Something as simple as adding the price for the service, the monthly cost, into the ad is something that if you're trying to do brand building might not be ideal, right? You don't want to show like, here's a paid service where you have to pay this much money per month.
Right.
But for us, at the scale we're at the moment, it was super beneficial because we had fewer clicks to the ad of people that were not willing to actually pay that type of money.
And so therefore
our click-through rate went down, but our conversion rate went up, because now only people that are saying, look, I'm happy to spend $8. They click the ad, and then they download the app, and then they signed up for our service. So there, those kind of things, I mean, obvious in hindsight, but we kind of naively first did something that was more of a marketing slogan, right? It's like time tracking for people who want to get paid. And that the click-through rate was great, but conversion was really low. And adding the price and making like time tracking invoicing $7.99 looked not as nice, but it worked way better.
Yeah. And we didn't have to pay for people clicking through it and believing it was a free service and then being disappointed that it wasn't.
So are you guys thinking about going into other revenue models through this application, or are you just stick to this one which is currently there?
we definitely want to keep it a paid app. We're not really interested in having it ad supported, because that's not the type of service we want to build.
Yeah.
Right.
We don't want to deal with advertisers.
Yeah.
We don't want to deal with Google AdWords or any
Right.
kind of
And we also
third-party
want
integrations.
I mean, we want the app to be very clean, and it's supposed to be an app that people can get work on, and it's meant to be like clutter-free, right? So we really want it to be a sleek sort of thing that you can have open on your Mac all the time. Yeah.
But we're definitely experimenting with, rather than at the moment we have a free trial. So if you want to try the app, you have to start a free trial, and then it auto converts as Apple's subscriptions do, right? So we're definitely experimenting soon with having a kind of free component to the app that you can start to get using to start using the app, and then potentially upsell people that are heavy users of the app. So rather than having everyone to start a subscription too.
Yeah. So one thing that we noticed quite early was that many people want to check out the app, but they didn't want to sign up for an account or for a subscription. So we actually ended this thing called tourist mode, which is basically you having the app in, like, you entering the app and viewing what the app will look like after 2 months of using it.
Like just with sample data.
With sample data so that you can see it. But you can't do anything at that point. But we do think that most people, we've seen that many people who end up buying the subscription or starting a subscription are very happy to continue paying. We have very low churn. So we think that that's the thing. Like, the app looks the worst on day one, and I think if you can use that app for a few more months or for a certain amount of projects, then I think that's going to make people understand the app so much more, and then they will see how useful it is. And then we think, like, if we can have that sort of extended trial period that doesn't activate a subscription, then I think that's going to make more people understand the app. And then at that point, I think we can have that sort of freemium model and the potential
also,
there.
Our app is inherently sticky, which sounds bad, but because the value it provides, right? The more time you track, the more you rely on the app, because you want to see your graphs and your history and your previous invoices, right? If someone gets value out of our app, I think most people will not regret spending $8 a month for it, because it does something that makes them money and that's actually useful, right? We want people that get value out of it to convert to paying users, but people that the app isn't for, we don't want their money, right? We don't want to get them into a situation where they forgot to cancel and then they're being charged. We want people that think, this is, I get more than $7.99 of value out of this app per month, so I want to pay. And getting people to understand what the app can do, I think is better than kind of having this kind of paywall up front.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're doing next. And there are a few other things that we want to do, but that's, as far as monetization, we think we both really like paid subscription apps, because I think that is something that makes it long-term sustainable for us, because
and I also like
it's hard, right?
Yeah.
If you get $100,000, that's great, but in 10 years, if you're still only having $100,000, all of a sudden that amount of money doesn't add up for you to spend an investment, and you're incentivized to actually move on to a different project. We don't want to do that, right? We want something where the project actually pays for time we're spending on it. And I think subscription is a really good model for that.
And I think that's also beneficial from a user's perspective. And that's what we're really trying to do. Rather than, I think when you have a paid app, you might have a tendency to hold some features that you can have a bigger update, like a 2.0 update, and then you could reach out to press about that, and you can get a bigger splash related to it.
Right.
And I think that's one approach, and I see why that's beneficial for you as a creator of the app. But I think for our users, we think that, like, we really rather want to provide them with features directly, because we think something like tracking your time and invoicing, if we change things to add like invoice rounding, that is something people are going to benefit from directly. It's not just a nice to have things that we might add in a 2.0 update. It's something that we want to push out as quickly as possible. So I think we'd rather want to have like an iterative process. And if we have that subscription model, it's lending itself better to that. And I think we give a different value to the user because of that.
And also, you often see people that complain that the entire interface has changed from one version to another and everything is different, right? For productivity, I believe if it's something that you use to get your work done, it's way better to have small incremental steps in a good direction and people kind of coming along for the journey rather than saying everything is different and no one knows where, because realistically,
so that they can adapt to those small changes.
Exactly. Because you as a developer, you care about all the UI changes you've made, right? And you're like, this is so cool and that's so much better. But for all your existing users, they just want to use your app to solve their problem. And if you solve their problem and then you change it all around, they now have to relearn it. And realistically, most people will not, realistically, you care the most about your app. So you're willing to learn the new things, but your users might just want to get something done. And getting in the way of that, I think is often counterintuitive, but it is beneficial to kind of have those steps, and they're adopting slowly into new features and they see them for the first time at maybe not even on release day, but maybe 2 weeks later. They're like, oh, that's cool, I turned that on. But we didn't get in their way. We didn't stop them from starting a timer. We're not stopping them from sending an invoice. It's more, there are new delightful things coming every few weeks, and hopefully some people will use them, and for people who don't need them, it's not getting in their way. That's kind of our philosophy of having updates.
Yeah, this is like so insightful for me, as as in I'm a developer myself, and if I think of someday developing a product myself, then this gives me a lot of deep insight about how should I think about the product that I'm going to build, which is as a summary, I would say you constantly think about how the customer thinks. Along with that, you also think about how you think as a developer about the application. So there are so many perspectives that you need to keep into account while making changes, all those things.
Yeah, and it's so
this
different,
is something
right? It really depends on what industry you're into, right? If you're in a very young audience, maybe it is a lot easier to make kind of sweeping changes every now and then, and people might even, Snapchat famously had not a great discoverable user interface, but people liked it partially because it was so hard for a lot of people, their parents couldn't use it, so they liked it more.
But also
it really depends on if you make a time tracking app, you probably don't want to make it so confusing that their parents can use it, because their parents might be you're actually
and not just because of that. Also, like if you are gonna start a timer and you just want to get, like, that's the premise of the whole app, like just start a timer and get to your work, like get to work on what you want to. And then if we're gonna have like a new UI, like a completely new interface all the time, then that's gonna be like for a productivity tool, that's going to be a mess, and people don't want to have to learn every time they send an invoice. They don't want to learn about the new feature, but features that we add are there and beneficial for people who need them. But we do those incremental instead.
That would rather add a intimidating thing to their application rather than solving something valuable for them. Right?
Yeah, and that's always what we think of too when we add a new feature. We spend almost more time on how do we add this so it doesn't get in the way of people who don't need it, right? So we're like, for example, for our invoicing, we have some people that want specific prefixes for their customers. So rather than having it called invoice number 1, they want to have it invoice, and then I don't know, if they work for a company that's called innovations, they want INV01 instead. And then if they work for a different company, they want to have that company's initials or first few letters. But a lot of people just have sequential invoicing, right? Invoice to company A is number 1, to invoice to company B is number 2. And we want to support both, but we want to do it in a way that no matter which way you're invoicing, because that's another thing, right? For our application, we have people that probably have already sent invoices in the past, and they might want to migrate to our service. So we also have to think about how do we allow people from other services to come to us and not get in their way, but also have a good, reasonable default for people who just started their business and want something to help them with their freelance work, and have a reasonable default to make it really easy to get started and really easy to get to the part where they actually do work for clients that they want to do, rather than figuring out our app. So it's there's so many interesting.
I kind of lost when you told me to tell me about all these things, because I'm constantly thinking about how you tell me. So I kind of visualize all those things, and This is cool. Like this is the most important question that I asked. I just liked it. Yeah. I mean, yes, this is good. On a personal note, like in India, if I talk about my country itself, so we generally feel like if I am doing a full-time job, see, I am in a full-time job. So when I think of transitioning into something else, like going into freelancing or be going into a contract type job, or thinking about doing my own product, working on my own product, it is something which is not common here, because there's a lot of instability in that. You don't get the stable income as you get in a full-time job. So this is kind of fear, and the parental society in India here, if you know about it, this is kind of a very personal relationship with the parents, where they tell you how to lead your life at up to a certain extent, right? Like if you are like, I am 24 right now, so my parents are, deeply involved in my decisions. When I take a decision about my career, see, tomorrow if I think of quitting my job, I need to tell them, and I need to discuss it with them, then I would do that. How to break off all those things and get into a system where I can think and do what I want to.
I mean, realistically, the stability argument is always tricky, right? Because I would argue that if you're an established freelancer and you have like 4 or 5 clients that you work with, that is actually more stable than working for one company, right? Because if that company says, you know what, I'm sick of you, they can let you go, and then you don't have any income. Well, if you make an app on the App Store, you probably have thousands of customers. If you do freelance work, you have maybe 4, 5, or 6 customers, right? So you actually have, if you would lose one client on the way, you lose a fifth or a sixth of your income. If we lose one customer for Orbit, we use a very small fraction of our income, right? So I would actually argue that once you make it through the initial steps, which will be hard, right? If you don't have any freelance customers or any clients, then you have no income. So the initial part is hard, but once you establish that, I would actually say it's a more stable source of income that is more flexible, that allows you to be in multiple places in the world, right? For Orbit, all the income we make, not one of our customers would care if we live in Vancouver, in Australia, in the Bay Area, or in India, or in Europe. No one would care, right? We can be wherever we want. Even if we would stop working on it tomorrow, we will still make money from it, because it doesn't require, like, there's no exchange of time for money, right? It's we build software that some people are willing to pay for, and they get value out of it. Even if we would stop building a new feature tomorrow for like 2 weeks, doesn't mean they lose all their value, right? So I think it's actually, and I think that's something that obviously is hard to sell, because you always have this period of uncertainty that you have to get through to then get to the other end. And that's why I often think building something on the side is a safe option, and probably a parent-friendly option.
Yeah, I was
because rather than say you quit your job, right? You just start to say, look, if freelance project would come around, I'm okay with. I'm happy to consider.
That's perfect. And I think it's the same with like making your own, even if it's not client work, even if it's making your own indie product. I think doing the same thing, showing like, look, there are this many people actually interested in using what I'm building. And I think that's satisfying for yourself as well. And then you can sort of see where it goes, and then prove that on its own.
And you can also have your personal threshold, right? You don't have to quit your job once your side project makes 1% of your income, right? You can wait until it makes 50%. And if it hits 50%, I think that's also, again, an easier sell. Because realistically, your parents or whoever is interested in your well-being, they probably wouldn't mind if you would say, look, my side project makes $10 million a year. They wouldn't say, don't do that, right? There is a threshold where parents will also be like, no, you do that one, because that makes a whole bunch of money. So I think realistically, those people have the best in mind for you as well. And it's often a good reality check, right? If you would say, I'm going all in on my, I don't know, my side project, and you never sold a copy and no one likes it, well, you would be in a worse situation, right? So getting into at least having some strong signs that it will actually go somewhere, I think is healthy anyways, because otherwise you just worried yourself, your parents are worried, everyone is worried. It's much better to know, all right, this is going in a direction, and now I just spend more time on it and it kind of transition. I think that's a healthy approach to it. Unless you're doing something where your startup is funded with VC, that obviously changes
that would obviously be another proof, right? You have people investing in you and you have sort of a source of income to there as well. So I think that would also be a way of convincing them.
But for bootstrapping, I think it's very healthy to say, all right, I want to get it to replace 20% of my income, and then I'm happy to shift maybe to part-time with the job and spend part-time on the other job, on your own product. And then if it grows to 50, 60, 70%, you can consider, all right, maybe now it's the time to go full on.
Yeah.
Right. So guys, this is something, this great piece of advice from Kai and Malin, which you can take, like for all my Indian friends, this is something which you can take as a takeaway from this conversation. So guys,
how to manage your parents.
Exactly. This is the main question. I will write it down at the bottom. So guys, what advice or suggestions do you have for all the budding tech entrepreneurs, or maybe budding engineers in the tech field? What advice do you have for all of them?
I think in terms of like, if you want to make your own thing, I think it's like we always think it's important to make something that you want to use yourself, or something that you're passionate about, at least. Like, even if it might be that your partner needs an app and you want to make something for that person that you see a use case for. I think that's always a motivator, like knowing that you have someone who, either it's yourself or you have someone in mind that you're building something for. That's always going to be more of a drive to do those things. But also, I think, see it as an opportunity of learning. And I think, like, for us, we always learn new things through building stuff. And I think that goes back to like the other question, like how to get into like the tech industry in general. I think I never really liked just sitting down with a laundry list of things I need to learn and then just learning them like by reading about them. I found that like implementing something, building something with the technology I want to learn is a better approach. And that also, then I will find tangentially related things that I'm also interested in. Maybe I make an app and then I also learn about app clips, or I learn about widgets, which was maybe not the intention in the first place, but then I learned those sort of adjacent areas, or I learn backend development, or I learn receipt validation. There are many things that you will find because you won't know. I think like you won't know what you are required to know for each job. So just having a pattern of like learning things and knowing how to learn those things is probably a good way of getting into like tech in general, because it changes all the time, right? You're never going to know everything about iOS development.
Right. Agree.
But also building something as you learn allows you to build something and learn something at the same time, right? You're actually able to ship something as the result of you learning something. And I think that's super valuable, because realistically for most people, their first kind of hobby app or side project or even their first startup, the chances of that succeeding are very slim, right? There's a reason that parents often are against that. It's not that everyone that starts their own project is becoming a millionaire. Then people wouldn't be as concerned about it, right? The probability of it failing are high. But if you are in a situation where you learn something and you actually have an app as a result of your learning exercise or your learning process, you know, if you do that 3-4 times, right, you learn some UI kit, you learn some app kit, you learn some Swift UI, you ship 3 apps already. And if you see one gets 100 downloads without you doing anything, and the other one you're trying to promote and no one wants it, maybe that's also giving you a good idea of what has some organic growth potential and having that influence your decision making. I think that's often hard, right? Because a lot of people, they want to start their own thing. They're very opinionated. They want to be like, nope, I know better than anyone else how this should work. And it can be disheartening if then people don't echo that sentiment towards you. So being a bit more willing to experiment and seeing what works, and then kind of take that input rather than just, you know, I'm not a believer in someone that every feedback that's a customer sends you needs to be implemented immediately. But often it gives you an idea of the problems that are there. And then your job is to figure out how can I solve this problem in the best way that reaches the most amount of people and makes the product better for them.
Right.
And I think you can do that if you're starting your project as well. If you see certain problems that people are just eager to find a solution to, and use that kind of information that you have to expand that and build it into a more impactful product, I think that's great.
And Mayank, you asked earlier as well, like recommendations how to get your first tech job. And I think although you shouldn't just make an app because you want a job, but I think if you're learning something anyways, and you are learning through developing an app, I think going through that extra step of actually releasing something in the App Store is going to help you stick out on job interviews as well. And also, again, you can show what you're passionate about. If you want to make a cricket app, then that also shows that you're interested in that particular area. And that shows some personality as well, and sort of makes you stick out when you're applying for a job.
Right. Even talking about examples in that sense, when I was applying for jobs in the first place, I had one application which I was doing as a project in my college at that point of time. So I made it live just because I wanted to apply for jobs. So I tried to make it live so that I can show it to the interviewer that, see, this is the application which is live on App Store, and you can have it, have a look if you have the device. And second thing is, what helped for me was YouTube, because I was doing YouTube since 2016. I was making some videos. I was not regular. I'm not still regular. I'm trying to be regular. So that helped me, because I told the interviewer while having the conversation that I also make videos about iOS. So he was like, "What is the name of the channel?" He used to check me. He used to check the channel right in front of me, and I was just laughing. So this is something which helped me in this process. Not just he was not focusing on my core skills at that point of time. He was focusing on how passionate I am for the for the tech, for the iOS. Even my first interviewer also said this, that Mayank, I don't see that you are great. You are average right now. This is when I was in my first interview. But what he said was, I'm selecting you just because you are passionate about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great way of hiring people too. Like actually hiring people who care about learning. I think that's the most important part.
But it's also, our industry changes so frequently that if you have someone who cares about it more than average, is way more valuable than someone who's very good at what you need right now, right? Because no matter what problem you're trying to solve, especially in our iOS kind of consumer app space, whatever problem you need someone to solve today is probably not going to be the same problem that you need them to solve in 3 months, right? Even after WWDC, right? There will be so many new things. And if you can hire someone who cares and learns all new things and watches some sessions, that is probably giving you a step up in like building stuff with the right frameworks, knowing what's new, what's possible. Because sometimes Apple releases small new framework editions that would before that would you spend like days or weeks on building, but now it's part of the framework. Knowing that's part of the framework means sometimes you can just say, look, I'm done. You gave me this task. I got it done in an hour instead of a week, because you just knew about something or you've heard of something existing and you're able to utilize that. I think those kind of things they're often, I'd rather have someone that knows that, simple example, that date formatters exist and they use that rather than someone who builds a really nice date formatting library over 2 weeks, right? One is definitely more impressive. Building a date library is very impressive, but did you need it? Probably not. Probably date formatters is plenty, and it probably caters for more edge cases than you could ever think of. And I think those kind of things
make sense. Right.
So
guys, this was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Likewise.
Likewise. That's great.
So much insightful for me personally. I don't know about the public or the audience who is listening to it, but I was happy and I was enjoying this conversation. So my job is done. Thank you so much for being on this podcast, guys. Kai and Malin.
Of course.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.